All right, good afternoon, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. My name is Hind Tazi, and I'm a consular officer here in Chennai. Now, you're all here to learn about the student visa application process. We're going to start with just a general overview of the whole process so that afterwards we can open up the floor to questions. So you can ask me, any concerns, any doubts, any questions that you have, and we'll address those directly. So, quick question. Does anybody have any idea how many Indian students are currently studying in the United States? Any guesses? A million? That's a lot. This is a tricky thing with starting with the question because somebody invariably gives you a huge number. It's actually 186,000, and this is more from 165,000 last year. Indian students are actually the second largest group of international students in the United States. There are three different kind of categories that we typically include in the general student visa category. The first one, the most typical one, is F1. This is the visa that you would get to go to a full-time college or university. It's for a degree program, but it's also if you're going for an English language program, a long-term English language program, that's also the type of visa that you would get. The other one is the M1. This is the non-academic vocational training visa. And then we have the J1, which is specific to the student exchange programs. The discussion will focus mostly on the F1 since that is by far the most common student visa that we give. But if any of you are interested in the other categories and you have questions about that, please ask me at the end of the presentation. So let's talk about where you begin. The first step, of course, is selecting the university, applying to the university, and getting accepted at the university. So one of the things that we recommend that you do is that you speak to EducationUSA because they can help you determine what university might be the best fit for you if you're at that stage where you want to go for studies in the United States, but you're not sure where to begin. Just like in India, we have a ton of colleges and universities in the US. They all have different specializations, and so it's useful to talk to EducationUSA to figure out where to get started. They can help you find the best fit. Once you've identified the university and you've applied, you've been accepted, the university will send you an I-20. This is a document that essentially tells us, the consular officers, that you've been admitted to the university. It tells us what the estimated cost of that university is. And it provides some additional information that is useful for us, like the start date and your program end date. The F1 visa that you would get is specific to that university. So most people, when they apply to university, they're not going to apply to just one school, right? Because you don't know how that's going to work out. So you identify a few schools that you're interested in. You may apply to a few. You might get several I-20s from the universities. Each I-20 is specific to the university, and the F1 student visa is tied specifically to that university. So make sure that when you have your multiple I-20s, you come with the one of the school that you want to attend because that's the one that the visa will be tied to. So when should you apply for your visa? Here the answer is the sooner the better, right? You don't want to apply and tell us that you're going to school tomorrow because we won't be able to get you your visa in one day. The one thing to remember is you cannot apply more than 120 days before your program start date. So even if you get your I-20, let's say 150 days before, don't schedule that appointment until you're within that 120-day window. The other thing to remember is that you cannot go to the United States until 30 days before your program start date. So let's say you get your I-20, you apply 120 days before, you come, we approve your visa, we give it back to you. You cannot go to the US immediately. At the airport, they will not admit you into the country until you're 30 days outside of that program start date. So make sure that you always remember to check that program start date. It's very important. The one other thing that I'd like to highlight here, going back to what I said previously about the multiple I-20s. So let's say when I applied to college, there were several colleges that I applied for that I was very excited about, but I had my preferences. The first I-20 that I got, I was ecstatic, and I thought, this is where I'm going, even though it was not my top choice. And then afterwards, I got admission into my actual top choice. So when you get that first I-20, If you're still waiting to hear back from some other universities and you still have time before that start date, think about waiting before you apply, because the visa, again, is tied specifically to that university. So if you come apply with one I-20, we issue that visa. If you then get admitted into your top choice, you get that new I-20, you will need to apply again for a new visa and start that process all over again. So apply early, but not 120 days before, and apply once you get the I-20 of the school that you want to go to, once you know exactly which university you really want to attend. So the specifics of the visa application process. The very first thing that you do is go to ustraveldocs.com/IN. This is where you're going to create your user account, and this is where you will fill out our actual visa application. It's simple, it's straightforward. It's going to ask for your biographical information, your educational history, your travel history. Just go through and fill everything out. The next thing you will have to do is pay your visa application fee. There are 3 different ways that you can do that. You can do this by electronic fund transfer, you can do it via mobile phone, or at Access and Citibank branches across our consular district. When you're filling out your application, you will have specific instructions for how to do each of these steps. Next, you have to schedule 2 separate appointments. The first appointment that you will have to schedule is to the Visa Application Center. When you go to the Visa Application Center, they will take your fingerprints and they will take a photo. The second appointment that you will have to schedule is here at the consulate for your actual visa interview. Once you're done with that, you have to pay your SEVIS fee. SEVIS stands for the Student and Exchange Visitor Information System. These are the instructions. You go to fmjfee.com, you enter your SEVIS number. Every I-20 that comes to you will have its specific SEVIS number, and that is the number that you will enter. And then again, you will follow the instructions that you're provided to make the payment. Pay the fee and make sure you print your receipt and that you keep it with your I-20 and your other documents that you will need later for the interview. So this is the first appointment that we had talked about, where you schedule a time to go to the Visa Application Center for the biometrics and the photo. Just arrive there about 15 minutes before your appointment. Don't get there too early. Don't be late to your appointment, but about 15 minutes before is a good time to arrive. And there, again, it's very simple. They will guide you through the process. We have an excellent team that works out there that will help you through this. These are the mandatory documents that we need for the interview. We need your appointment letter. We need a valid passport, the barcode page of your visa application, the SEVIS receipt, and then if you're an F1 or an M1 visa applicant, we need your I-20. If you're applying for a J1, we need your DS 2019. These are the only mandatory documents. You may decide to bring other documents like bank records or any other, maybe your school transcripts. You may want to bring those as supporting documentation, but those are not required for the interview. And the visa officer, the consular officer, may not ask you for those documents. So don't try to hand us the documents until we ask you for them, because those are not required. But if you want to bring them, you can. On the day of the interview, what happens? So first thing, arrive at the consulate at your appointment time and just on time. Again, don't be late. You never want to be late to your appointments, but do not arrive early. You will not be let into the consulate if you arrive before your appointment time. So you're not going to get ahead of the rush. You're not going to get ahead of everything. We have scheduled appointments time for everyone to make sure that the process goes smoothly and to try to give you all the best service that we can, so that you try to, so we can have you go through the process as quickly and smoothly as possible. The first thing that you will do when you arrive at the consulate is go through the security checkpoint. One thing to remember is that there are prohibited items. So no phones, no electronic items, and you cannot bring backpacks. There's no place at the consulate to store these items. So if you bring them, you will not be allowed in with these items and you will have to leave them with somebody outside. So the best thing that we can recommend is that you leave them somewhere else. Do not bring these with you so that, again, you're able to go in as quickly and smoothly as possible. Once you're in the visa lobby, we will take your fingerprints again. In this case, we're just verifying your fingerprints. And then you will be interviewed by the consular officer. It's pretty quick, it's pretty straightforward. So what happens at the interview? What should you expect? One of the things that people are always surprised by is how short the interviews are. They're typically just a few minutes. So don't expect that you will come into an office and sit with us for half an hour. It's going to be a few minutes where we ask you a few questions so that we get to know you a little bit better. We know why you're applying, what your plans are. So just a few minutes. As I said earlier, the officer might not look at your documents. We only have that short number of required documents. Everything else is just supporting documentation. And the officer will ask personal questions. So what are all these questions about? The main thing that the officer is trying to determine is that you are a credible student, that your primary purpose of travel to the United States is to study, and that you have a plan to pay for your studies. These are not very difficult questions, right? You all selected the universities that you applied to for a reason. Among the universities that you got admitted to, you selected that particular one for a reason. So just think about those reasons. Why is it that you chose to study in the US in the first place? Why that university? Why did you select your course of study? How do you see this new degree helping you in the future? And then how do you plan to finance your studies? I had no idea what my parents' salaries were until I applied to college, because then I needed to know exactly how much they were making, both before taxes, after taxes, how much they were going to be able to contribute to my education, how much they were going to contribute to my siblings' education. I have a younger sister and a younger brother, and I needed to know how much was going to be set aside for me, for my siblings, and what the loan amount was that I was going to need to cover these expenses. And remember that expenses, it's not just tuition that we're talking about. We're also talking about your room and board. You know, what are your living costs going to be? How are you going to pay for all the books? How are you going to pay for the travel to get to the United States and back? So just make sure that you have that honest, straightforward discussion with your parents or whoever else might be financing your education so that you can communicate that to us. And as I said, you can bring supporting documents that explain to us how you plan to finance your studies. We may not look at them, but at some point we might ask to look at something. So what happens next? At the end of the interview, you are either approved or denied the visa under Section 214B. Section 214B is part of U.S. immigration law. And what that law tells us consular officers is that anybody coming to apply for a visa, we are supposed to assume that they are an intending immigrant unless they convince us otherwise. So one of the things that we're looking to do is to determine what are your future plans, what are your ties to the country. You know, and we're looking at your professional ties to India, we're looking at your family, your cultural ties, your social ties. It's not one single item that we're looking at. We're looking at the whole picture, at, you know, a variety of things, but all of those things fall under this refusal code. The other thing that might happen is that you might be refused under Section 221G, which means that you're in administrative processing. What this means is that we weren't able to get to a final decision on your application, that something is still missing. There's some additional work that needs to be done. Here again, it may be for a variety of reasons. If it's because of some documentation that we need from you, I strongly encourage you to just work through it as quickly as possible so that we may move forward. It is a refusal, but as I said, it's administrative processing, and eventually you will either be approved or denied. That's what happens to the visa, but that's what administrative processing means. How will you get the passports? So typically it takes about 5 business days for the passports to be ready once we've decided to issue the visa. And you will get either an SMS or an email notifying you that your passport is ready and confirming the pickup location. We have 33 different pickup locations across India that your passport may be delivered to. And this is the same one that when you originally applied, created your profile, this is the location that you selected where you told us that you wanted your passport to go to. Once it's delivered, you have 14 days to pick up your passport. If you don't pick it up, it gets sent back to us, and you will then have to come back to Chennai again to the consulate to pick it up. The other thing that we've just recently started is home delivery for the passports. This is a premium service that we have. When you're applying, you can select premium delivery service, and you don't pay the courier until the passport is delivered back to your home, and that's 500 rupees. If you have any questions, these are the websites that I strongly recommend that you look at. The first one is where you apply for the visa. That's the ustraveldocs.com/IN. We have the call center numbers that you can call for additional information and questions that you may have. If you have specific inquiries, that is the email address that you can go to. And for additional information on universities, colleges in the United States, and education in the United States, you can refer to the United States India Educational Foundation, USIEF, at usief.org.in. So that's the general overview, the presentation that I have, and now I will open the floor to questions. So who wants to start us off? Yes.
So if in case I got an admit letter, currently I have an admit letter, but that is only through mail. I haven't received my physical form of an admit letter. Will that suffice for visa application, or should I request the university to provide me a physical letter?
So the question is, if you receive an admit from the university by email and you haven't yet received the physical copy, is that enough to apply for a visa? So the answer is no. What we need is the actual I-20. So it's not the acceptance that you've been admitted, because usually you get a letter saying, congratulations, you've been admitted to this university. That is different from the actual I-20, which is an official form, and that is what we're looking for. It's the I-20. That's what's required for the visa interview.
And thank you for that. And the next one is for an I-20, I'll have to request the college telling them that I'll be able to pay for myself through the entire study process. Once I receive my I-20, I'll have to pay the SEVIS fee, and I'll have to, and when will I be able to get an appointment letter from the visa office? Once I have my I-20, should I provide them beforehand I get an appointment, or could I do it the other way around?
So the question is, once I have the I-20 and you've made the SEVIS payment?
No, I have not made it.
Okay, and haven't made the SEVIS payment, can I go ahead and schedule the interview? So the SEVIS payment is a very quick process. Once you have your I-20, you can make your SEVIS payment right away, because all it is going to that website, fmjfee.com, entering your SEVIS number, which you will have on your I-20, and making the payment. So you can schedule your appointment as soon as you have that. We will not be able to complete the interview without that SEVIS fee. So the most important thing to do is to make sure that you pay your SEVIS fee before you come to the appointment, and that you print that receipt and have it with you. But as soon as you get your I-20, you're able to go ahead and make your SEVIS payment.
So SEVIS payment is specific to every I-20 from every university?
No, the SEVIS payment is just general payment that you will make once.
Okay.
That's correct. That's correct.
I can use any I-20 with the same SEVIS payment?
I believe so.
Okay, and my third one will be, if I'm applying for an F1, I don't have to worry about DS process, DS 160 or DS 2019.
So the question is, once I've applied for an F1, that I don't need to worry about the DS 160 or the DS 2019. Yeah. So you're confusing some forms a little bit. So the DS 160 is our general, it's the visa application form. So when you go to the ustraveldocs.com/IN, there you will be filling out essentially the DS 160. That is the application. Within that application, you will be selecting specifically the F1 visa. That's what you're applying to. The DS 2019, you do not need to worry about. The DS 2019 is for a different visa class. That is for the J1 student exchange visa class. That is for the J1 visa, similar to the I-20. Exactly. So you would not be getting a DS 2019. You would be completing the DS 160, but that is the visa application. Sure. Any other questions?
How
Yes.
long is the processing time for a visa?
The question is, how long is the processing time for the visa? So if you're asking about just once the visa has been approved, how long does that take? It typically takes about 5 business days. So it's a pretty fast turnaround.
Thank you.
Sure.
What if it's rejected? How long will I be given a period before which I could apply again?
So if it's rejected, is there a certain period that you would have to wait before applying again? The question is no. If your visa is denied, you can apply again immediately. One thing that I would encourage you to consider is that consular officers all apply the same law. And so there may be times in a subsequent interview where you're able to provide more evidence that you were not able to provide the first interview that may convince the consular officer that you are in fact eligible for this visa. However, if you do not have that additional evidence, if it is all the same information, then you are likely to get the same denial because we are all applying the same law. So that's one thing to always remember. We assess the visa applicant, we assess the situation, but what we are comparing that to is requirements according to US law. And so that's the standard that all of us apply. Yes?
Does getting rejected once and the next time you apply, does the probability of getting going through the process, does it reduce, or is there something connection between the successive applications?
So the question is, if you apply once and you get refused, does that increase or affect the likelihood of you getting a visa in subsequent applications? So this is kind of getting back to what I was just saying, that it depends on what the reason for the refusal was. If the applicant who got refused the first time is able to provide different evidence, that they're able to provide new evidence that sheds new light on their application and their purpose of travel, then it may make a difference and it may lead to visa approval. However, if nothing has changed and the applicant's situation does not meet the requirements that the law has set for that visa class, then that person will likely get refused. But it's not because they were refused previously, but because that new officer is applying the same law and did a separate evaluation and also found the person, the student, the visa applicant, not eligible. So one of the things that we do, that we work very hard to do, is make sure that every time a person comes in for a visa interview, that they have a new and fresh interview. So if you were to apply in Chennai, for example, and that person, and you get rejected, if you come again to Chennai for a second interview, you will not get interviewed by the same consular officer you had the first time. You will get a new officer so that you have a new set of eyes looking at your application. But like I said, we're all applying the same standards of the law. So it's really going to depend on that specific case. But every time that you come for a new interview, we are giving you a new, fresh interview. Any other questions? Yes.
2 appointments that you told we'll have to book separately. Could that be on the same date following appointments or something like that?
Typically, they're not on the same day. Because, the question was for the 2 appointments that you have to schedule, the one at the Visa Application Center and then the one at the consulate for your interview, can you do them on the same day? And the answer is no. And mostly because we only do interviews in the morning. And that's also the time that you would go to the Visa Application Center to give in your fingerprints and take your picture. So there's not enough time for that processing to happen for you to then come back. You may be able to schedule them on 2 consecutive days. It also depends on what the availability of appointments is, but you typically are not able to do it on the same day. Any other questions? Do we have any questions from our online viewers?
Yes, we have one question from Ramesh Chaudhary. His question is, hello, my visa was rejected 8 times on F1 student visa. I don't know why they rejected me. At the last attempt, visa officer told why you were coming to visa again and again. Do some work here for some time. After that, we can give the visa to you. So try to work here for at least 2 years. I don't know why he didn't. Why he suggested me to get visa. Even they did not ask single question, but they just rejected me. Kindly help me to get to US.
Okay, so the question is from a person who's applied 8 different times for their student visa and got rejected 8 different times. And the person said that the last consular officer who interviewed him said, why are you applying again? Why don't you stay, work for a couple of years, and then you can maybe try to apply again? And why am I being rejected? So this is, again, this really points at the fact that we all apply the same law and we all have the same standards to follow. If I apply for a student visa today and I get refused, if I apply again in 1 week and I get refused again and nothing has changed between today and next week, and then I go and apply again and nothing has changed again, basically my situation has not changed. And so everything that I'm presenting at that interview is essentially the same, which means that while I can't provide the specifics of your case, since I'm not familiar with your case, essentially this applicant does not meet the requirements that the law has set for F1 student applicants. And so he may have gone to 8 different consular officers, but since they're applying the same law, they came to the same conclusion that he currently does not qualify for a visa. Now, he may currently not qualify for a visa, but things change, right? Our family situations change, our professional situations change, our academic interests change. So what the consular officer was suggesting by saying, work here for a couple of years is, in a couple of years, your situation may be different and you may be eligible for a new student visa to go to the United States. So just because you've been refused multiple times does not mean that you are permanently ineligible for this kind of visa. It may be that your situation may change and you may now qualify for it. But what they're trying to get at is, at this time, this applicant is not qualified for the visa, but maybe in a few years, based on different family and life circumstances, the person might be eligible.
Will I be given a reason why my visa is rejected later on if I ask, or will I be given a review of my
The question is, will I be given a reason if my visa is rejected? And there I will say that you will be given the general reason why your visa is rejected, and that is the US law that we're applying. And so you would get a written document with an explanation of that section of the law. We may not sit and talk to you about your specific reason directly. And part of the reason is that we're not looking at any one single thing, right? We're looking at a whole picture. We're all complex people. We all have a number of different kinds of ties to the country. We have a variety of interests. We all come from, there's various different things that go into the visa interview. And so we may not be able to pinpoint any one specific reason for you. What we will do is explain the general terms under which the visa was denied.
I have a question.
Yes.
This is the first time I'm entering United States with the help of F1 visa. So after going there, with the visa officer asked me to, do you have any of the friends in US? It would be any problem. Basically, my question is, I don't have any of the relatives in US, so I can enter United States as a free bird.
The question is, if you're applying for an F1 visa, if the officer asks if you have family or friends in the US, is that a problem? It's part, again, of the picture, but it's not necessarily a problem. We all have family and friends all over the country, for example, right? If you don't have, again, you're not expected to have family or friends in the United States. So whether you have family or friends in the United States, whether you don't have family or friends in the United States, that's one piece of the picture. Some consular officers will ask you that question. some will not. It's just them trying to assess your overall situation. The thing here that I would really stress is to be completely upfront and forthcoming and honest with the visa officer. So don't try to hide anything from the officer. If you selected a university because your cousin studies there, and it's easier for you because then you're going to go and live with that cousin, tell us, we want to know. Or you have a sister who graduated from a different university and that's where you want to go. It's really not going to be, changed your circumstances one way or the other, but we want to understand what the whole picture is. We want to understand what kind of ties you have to India, what kind of ties you have to the US, why you're interested in studying in the US, why you're interested in that school. And those questions help us understand those questions a lot better. Yes?
If I already have a tourist visa to the US and I get a F1 visa, what will happen to my existing one?
So the question is, if you already have a tourist visa to the US and you get an F1, what happens to your tourist visa? So your tourist visa continues to be valid. You're able to go to the US on your tourist visa on vacation. You can go to the US on your tourist visa to visit schools if you have time, for example, and you want to visit them and see what they're like. But you cannot go to the US on your tourist visa and start studying there. You have to have the F1 student visa. But the F1 student visa application is separate from the B1, B2 tourist visa. And so the main thing to remember is, depending on what that specific purpose of the trip is, that is the visa that you would use to enter the country. So you can have both, you just would be using them at different times depending on why you're going to the United States. Yes?
If I'm applying for a student visa and there I go, I find a little extra time. So I would like to engage myself in part-time jobs or work. Should I mention that as my interest, or should there be any modification in the visa application, or does it not affect the visa?
So the question is, if I go on my student visa and I'm interested in, if I have extra time, maybe working part-time while I'm also studying, should I mention that? Will that affect my visa? So again, that is part of the picture that we're looking at. So there is something called, there's practical training, there's CPT that you can get, and it will be on your I-20 typically. It has to be approved. So typically as a student, you can't just go and just start working part-time wherever you want. That employment has to be approved. And so if that's something that you're interested in doing, that is something that we want to know. It may be that the university that you're interested in applying to, one of the reasons you're interested in enrolling there is because they have some programs that provide you with real work professional experience at the same time that you're studying. And we want to know that. Now, are you going to be studying 1 hour a week and working the rest of the time? Or are you going to be studying 20 hours a week and maybe only working 5 to 10 hours? These are, it's really going to be specific to that particular case. And so we would want to have the whole picture of what your plans are when going to the United States.
But that doesn't alter the type of visa?
No, it does not alter the type of visa because your primary purpose is still to study. And so even like I said, you would not be able to just go and take on any kind of employment because F1 student visa is fairly restrictive in terms of the kind of employment that you can do, and it has to be authorized. But it would be, if your primary goal is going to study, you're enrolled in a degree program, then you would still go as the F1 student visa.
Can the F1 visa be extended?
Can the F1 visa be extended? The answer there, it depends. So it depends on the reasons for why it's being extended.
I want to do now I'll be going for masters. After that I want to pursue my doctorate. Then it can be extended.
Sure. So the question is, if I'm going for a master's program and then I want to pursue a doctorate, can my visa be extended? So if you complete your master's program and you now are enrolling in a PhD program, you would actually get a different I-20 for that. And so when you come back to India, you would not be able to typically go back on that same visa that you had before, you would have to apply for a new visa. And typically the visa is, like I said, the I-20 shows your program start dates. And so the visa duration is typically tied to those program start and end dates. And so you would need a new application to continue your PhD studies. In that situation, you may be able to apply via Dropbox, but it's going to depend on the specifics.
So I need to come back and then I need to go again to the United States.
So the question is whether you would have to come back to India and then to go back. Yes and no. So when you're already in the United States, you're studying there, you enroll in a PhD program, you may be able to apply directly to the Department of Homeland Security to extend your status in the United States, basically. And that's controlled by a different department of the United States. So you're allowed to be in the United States, even if your visa has potentially expired, because you've already contacted them and had them adjust and extend your status. Once you leave the country, in order to go back, you need that new visa. So the visa does not determine how long you end up able to stay in the United States. That's determined by the Department of Homeland Security. But the visa is what allows you to go to an airport and ask for entry into the United States. And so that's why if you leave and come back, then you would just have to ask and apply for a new visa.
So how many days is the passport delivered back to the candidate?
The question is, after how many days is the passport delivered back to the candidate? So there, it's about 5 business days. Yes?
As I was telling, if you take another degree, we have to get the same visa. As such, if I'm doing an MBA program and I'm extending it to 6 months extra with some electives or something, if it be an extension of the visa, or I have to apply for a different one?
So the question is, we talked about starting a new degree. What if you go on an F1 student visa for, say, an MBA program, but then you end up needing an extra 6 months, maybe because of electives? It could be maybe you had a family emergency, any reason why you weren't able to necessarily complete your program in time. Will you need to apply for a new visa? And so there again, it depends on where you are. If you're in the United States, you've been in status the whole time, and you've applied to the Department of Homeland Security to extend your status, to extend your stay, then you're already in the United States, you won't need to do that. If you come back to India and you're here for long enough that you've lost your existing student status. So typically, if you're out of the country, out of the United States, or if you've disrupted your studies for about 5 months, then your student status is terminated. At that point, you would have to actually apply for a new visa that will be connected to a new SEVIS ID and all of that. So it really depends on the situation, on why the reason is that you're extending, was there any rupture in your student status or not, and where you happen to be, whether you're in the United States or in India. Do we have any questions from online?
That's pretty much it.
Any other questions? Going once? Going twice? That's it? All right, excellent. Well, thank you very much for all of you coming here. Thank you for being interested in studying in the United States. It's really wonderful seeing so many people interested in pursuing their studies in the US. It really is amazing seeing just the level of interest that you have. As somebody who studied in the US also, it was great seeing just the various international groups there. You really do enrich student life there. So thank you very much for your interest, and thank you for your questions. And just remember these websites and phone numbers for any questions or additional information that you may need. Excellent.